10 years ago, I buried my husband. 2 years ago, I thought I had a family again. But one phone call, one careless conversation I wasn't meant to hear, showed me the brutal truth. I was just a burden. That's when I realized what they wanted wasn't me at all. It was this house. My name is Lena, and I'm 60 years old. I stand here now in front of what used to be my home, a white craftsman house in Asheville, North Carolina, that Paul and I bought 35 years ago. The wraparound porch still holds the swing he built with his own hands. And the oak tree in the front yard has grown so tall, its branches nearly touch the roof. This place used to mean everything to me. Used to. When Paul died in that car accident, I thought my world had ended. Caleb was only 17 then, still figuring out who he wanted to become. The insurance money helped, but it wasn't enough to cover everything. College tuition at Columbia University doesn't come cheap, and I wanted my son to have every opportunity his father would have given him. So I worked. I waited tables at Murphy's Diner until my feet swelled every night. I cleaned houses on weekends until my back ached so badly I could barely stand straight. I took in alterations and mended clothes until my fingers were permanently stained with thread dye. Every sacrifice felt worth it when Caleb graduated. I was so proud sitting in that auditorium, watching him walk across the stage. Paul would have been proud too. But then the real world hit Caleb hard. The economy was tough, and his degree in philosophy didn't open as many doors as we'd hoped. When he called me that winter night, his voice small and defeated, asking if he could come home just for a little while, my heart broke for him. Of course he could come home. This was his home. 6 months later, he arrived with Molina. She was beautiful in that effortless way young women possess, with dark hair that caught the light and a smile that could charm anyone. They'd been dating for over a year, she explained, and things were getting serious. Since Caleb was moving back temporarily, it made sense for her to come too. They could both save money, figure out their next steps together. I loved the idea of having life in the house again. The silence since Paul's death had been deafening. The first few months were wonderful. Molina helped me in the kitchen, teaching me how to make authentic Mexican rice the way her grandmother had taught her. Caleb seemed more relaxed than he'd been since college. We'd sit on the front porch in the evenings, sharing stories and planning for their future. When they talked about maybe getting married someday, starting a family, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope for the future. But slowly, things began to shift. It started with small things. Molina would refer to spaces in the house differently. Instead of asking if she could use my sewing room, she'd mention needing to organize our craft space. When neighbors stopped by, Caleb would introduce the house as theirs, not mine. When I corrected him the first time, he laughed and said, "Come on, Mom. We're family. What's yours is ours. Right?" I let it slide. Family was family. Then Caleb offered to help me with the bills. It seemed practical. He was good with computers and online banking, things that still felt foreign to me. One by one, he switched the utilities to his name. For convenience, he said. So I wouldn't have to worry about remembering due dates. The mortgage was still in my name, of course, but everything else gradually shifted. When mail started arriving addressed to him instead of me, he explained that he'd updated the mailing address as part of streamlining everything. I should have paid more attention. I should have asked more questions. The house itself began to change. Molina suggested repainting the hallway. The soft blue Paul and I had chosen together was outdated, she said. Cream would be more modern, more neutral. I watched her roll primer over the color Paul had carefully applied 15 years ago, each brushstroke erasing another piece of our history. When I mentioned feeling sad about it, she patted my shoulder and said we were building something beautiful together. We. That word started appearing more often. They talked about the future constantly. Their future. When they had children, they'd need more space. The master bedroom would be perfect for a nursery, with its large windows and connected bathroom. I could move to the smaller room downstairs, the one that had been Paul's office. It would be cozy, they assured me. More manageable for someone my age. I stood in the doorway of my bedroom that night, looking at the bed Paul and I had shared for over 20 years. At the dresser where his cologne bottle still sat untouched. At the window he'd fixed with his own hands when the frame started warping. They wanted to turn this sacred space into a nursery. They wanted to move me to what felt like a guest room in my own home. The thought made me feel smaller than I'd ever felt before. But the real wake-up call came 6 months later, when they took a trip to Paris. Caleb had landed a good job finally. Something in marketing that paid well enough for them to celebrate with a European vacation. I was happy for them, even though it stung a little that they'd planned something so extravagant, while I was still pinching pennies to keep the house maintained. The night before they left, Caleb forgot his phone on the kitchen counter. It rang around 11, and without thinking, I picked it up to take it to him. But as I walked toward the stairs, I heard voices through the phone speaker. They must have connected accidentally, the way phones sometimes do. What I heard changed everything. "Who was that?" Molina's voice. Whispering. Probably Mom again. Something about the house. Caleb sounded tired. Maybe a little drunk. "She's becoming such a burden. When we get back, we'll just convince her to sign the papers. Pride always works with her. When do we get the master bedroom? She doesn't know we're about to take everything. If she pushes back, we'll mention assisted living. Medical bills. She's not getting any younger." My hands trembled as I fumbled to activate the recording function on the phone. I captured the rest of their conversation, each word burning into my memory like acid. They talked about my house as if it already belonged to them. They discussed my future as if I were a problem to be managed, rather than a mother who had given everything for her child. I sat in the laundry room afterward, clutching a towel I'd been folding, feeling like my blood had turned to ice. Every memory came flooding back. The double shifts I'd worked, the vacations I'd skipped, the arthritis in my hands from years of manual labor, all so Caleb could have opportunities I'd never had. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a plan. I pulled the fireproof box containing the house deed from under my bed and stared at my name on the documents. Lena Patricia Morrison. This house was mine. Paul and I had worked ourselves to the bone to pay it off early. Every nail, every shingle, every coat of paint represented our labor, our dreams, our love. The next morning, I called my old friend Joanna, who'd become a lawyer after her own divorce 20 years ago. She'd watched Caleb grow up, had always been fond of him. When I played her the recording, her face grew grim. "Oh, Lena," she said quietly. "I'm so sorry." Within 2 weeks, while my son and his girlfriend were touring the Louvre, I had listed my house with Marcus, a real estate agent Joanna recommended. The market was hot, and Marcus was confident we could close quickly with the right buyer. I packed carefully, taking only what truly mattered: photos of Paul, his favorite reading chair, my mother's china, and the books we'd collected together over the years. Everything else I boxed meticulously: Caleb's childhood soccer trophies, Molina's clothes and makeup, the expensive coffee maker they'd bought last month, the new dining room set they'd chosen without asking me. I labeled each box clearly and arranged for them to be stored in a climate-controlled facility across town. My new apartment in Charlottesville was small but bright. with large windows and no memories attached to the walls. I chose it specifically because I'd never been there with Paul, never lived there with Caleb. It would be purely mine. On my last night in the house, I walked through each room slowly. In the kitchen, I touched the countertop where Paul used to make his terrible coffee every morning. In the living room, I remembered Christmas mornings when Caleb was small, his excited squeals echoing off the walls. In our bedroom, I said goodbye to the dreams Paul and I had shared about growing old together in this place. Then I left a note on the kitchen table. Surprise, the burden has done something. I placed the house keys beside it, locked the door from the inside, and left through the garage. My phone started ringing 2 days later. Caleb's name flashed on the screen over and over. Then came the voicemails. Mom, what did you do? We came home, and everything's gone. The house is sold? How could you sell our house without telling us? Our house. Even in his panic, he couldn't acknowledge whose name was on the deed. Mom, pick up. We found your note. I don't know what you think you heard, but you made a huge mistake. This was our home too, and you had no right to sell it. We're talking to a lawyer. You've really done it this time. I listened to each message once, then deleted them. I didn't respond. 3 weeks later, I agreed to meet them at a coffee shop in downtown Charlottesville. I arrived 5 minutes late intentionally, wanting them to sit with their anxiety for a moment. They looked smaller somehow, sitting at the corner table. Caleb's eyes were red-rimmed, and Molina kept glancing around nervously. I sat down across from them and placed my phone on the table. Without saying anything, I pressed play on the recording from Paris. The color drained from both their faces as they heard their own voice. Believe them. It was never your house. I told them. It was mine. Paid for by me. Maintained by me. Protected by me. And you taught me exactly what I should never allow myself to become. I slid an envelope across the table containing the storage unit information and walked away. I didn't look back. The first month in my new apartment was difficult. I'd wake up reaching for Paul's side of the bed, forgetting I was in a different place entirely. I'd start to call Caleb about something silly I'd seen on television, then remember why we weren't speaking. The silence felt different than the quiet after Paul's death. That had been grief. This was loss of a different kind. But gradually, something unexpected happened. I began to remember who I was before I became someone's wife, someone's mother, someone's burden. I joined a support group for women dealing with difficult family boundaries. I volunteered at a shelter for single mothers, helping them navigate government assistance programs I'd learned about during my own struggles. One evening, nearly a year after I'd moved, I drove past my old house. There was a different car in the driveway, children's toys scattered on the lawn. The new owners had painted the front door red instead of the forest green Paul had chosen. It looked happy, lived in. I didn't stop. I didn't feel the need to. Caleb sent birthday cards the first year. Generic, store-bought ones with messages like, "Thinking of you today." I sent thank you notes in return. Polite, but distant. Molina reached out once through social media, suggesting we all needed to heal as a family. I didn't respond. Some wounds aren't meant to be healed through forced reconciliation. I learned to make peace with the fact that I didn't lose my son. I lost the version of my son I'd wanted to believe in. What I'd let go of wasn't a child who needed me. It was the illusion that he saw me as anything more than a means to an end. In the space that loss created, I finally found something that felt genuinely mine. Not built around someone else's needs or expectations, but grown from my own choices, my own values, my own understanding of what I deserved. I write in a journal now, something I never had time for when I was busy being everything to everyone else. In one entry, I wrote, "You were never a burden. You were the foundation. You were the one who kept everything from falling apart. You carried what no one else could see and gave more than anyone ever gave back. And when they tried to diminish your worth, you chose to leave. That wasn't cruelty. That was clarity. Some days, I still feel the weight of what I lost. The future I'd imagined with grandchildren visiting, holiday meals around my old dining room table, the satisfaction of watching my child build a life I'd helped make possible. But I've learned that grieving those losses doesn't mean I was wrong to protect myself. I have a small circle of friends now. Women who understand that sometimes love means walking away. We meet for coffee every Thursday. And sometimes we talk about our children. Sometimes about books or gardening or politics. But always, we talk as people who matter in our own right, not as appendages to other people's stories. On quiet Sunday mornings, I sit in my apartment's small sunroom with a cup of tea and watch the world wake up outside my window. Students walk by with their backpacks and dreams. Young families push strollers and chase toddlers. Elderly couples hold hands as they navigate the sidewalk together. I used to think that contentment required other people's approval. That peace meant keeping everyone happy, regardless of the cost to myself. Now I know that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's worst impulses, even when that someone is your own child. The woman who gave everything and asked for nothing in return is gone. In her place is someone who understands that her worth isn't measured by what she can provide to others, but by her willingness to honor her own truth. I don't know if Caleb and Molina ever learned anything from what happened. I don't know if they understand the difference between being supported and being entitled to support. That's not my responsibility anymore. What I do know is this: the house they thought they were inheriting was built on my foundation of sacrifice and love. When they tried to claim ownership of something that was never theirs to take, they revealed that they'd never really seen the foundation at all. They'd only seen the structure. I took the foundation with me when I left. They got to keep the building. Sometimes, in the evening light of my new home, I catch my reflection in the window and see not a burden, but a woman who finally learned the difference between generosity and self-abandonment. The distinction matters more than I ever knew. The story doesn't end with reunion or forgiveness because some stories don't need those things to be complete. Sometimes the ending is simply this: a woman who was told she was too much learns that she was actually never enough for people who couldn't see her value. And sometimes, that's exactly the ending she needed.